If you look for it, every day has cause for celebration. Celebrate a friend for their promotion, baby wedding, life thing. Celebrate yourself for keeping the couch warm. It's no easy feat, especially if it's a big couch. Or maybe you just want to celebrate living in 2023, where you can get beer, wine, and spirits delivered from Drizzly in under 60 minutes without leaving said couch. So download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com and get your favorite drinks delivered today.
Hey, it's Mistress Carrie, reporting for duty from MCHQ for episode 103 of the Mistress Carrie podcast. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Boldfoot Socks. They're 100% American-made, and 5% of all of their proceeds get donated to veterans charities. Matter of fact, Boldfoot Socks is family and veteran-owned. And if you log on to boldfoot.com, you can check out all of their styles. And there are tons. Boldfoot Socks even has a Sock of the Month club. And they offer 3 months of free, wait for it, sock insurance. If your socks rip, tear, or develop holes, they'll replace them, no questions asked. They've got dress socks, casual socks, Argyle, Chevron, Digi-Camo, Patriotic, Stripes. They've got polka dots. They've got premium solids, collections, 3-packs, gift packs, and so much more. You've got feet, they need socks, and why not buy them where they were grown and sewn? Right here in the good old US of A. Support a family-owned and veteran-owned business. Just log on to boldfoot.com. And before we get to this week's guest, George Pendergast from Dishwalla, I want to remind you that Facebook is getting rid of their podcast integration. Their parent company, Meta, said they're moving in a different direction. So if you're listening to this episode of the Mistress Carrie podcast on the Facebook mobile app, if you like the Mistress Carrie Facebook page and the podcast episodes just generate automatically, make sure that you subscribe and follow the Mistress Carrie podcast through whatever service you would otherwise listen to podcasts. There's a whole list of links at mistresscarrie.com. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe and follow the Mistress Carrie podcast. Okay, I had a chance to sit down with George Pendergast from Dishwalla. And it was on the day that the band's new EP was released. It's called Alive. And you would think that George would be out celebrating with the band, but he was at home with COVID. So we had a chance to talk about the recording of the EP. We talked about 90s music and touring and songwriting and inspiration. George is also a drum instructor, and we talked about how he was able to keep teaching classes through the pandemic digitally. He talked about the new challenges in music dealing with the pandemic and how the band's career was affected by the changes of technology back in the late 90s. We had a great conversation, and if you're a fan of Dishwalla or 90s music in general, you're going to love this episode. But unfortunately, technology disconnected us at one point in the episode, and you'll hear us recover from that too. Nothing's perfect. So allow me to introduce you to George Pendergast from Dishwalla.
Hey, what's up? This is Sully from Godsmack. Strap on those boots, baby, because you are now in the trenches of the war room with the one and only Mistress Carrie right here on the Mistress Carrie podcast.
What's up? This is Joe Rogan, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie.
Her hair so lovely, pretty eyes.
Hey, this is Brent from Shinedown, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie. Hey, Carrie, go put your bra on, girl.
Hey, this is Steven Tyler, and you be listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
What's up? This is Aaron from Stain, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie.
Hi, everybody. This is Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters, and you're listening to the one, the only Mistress Carrie.
Hey, this is David from the band Disturbed, and you're listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
Hi, Bruce Dickinson here from Iron Maiden. Yes, indeed, Miss Whiplash herself, Mistress Carrie, is here to unchain your brain.
Hi, this is Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. You're listening to Mistress Carrie.
This is Dennis Leary. You are listening to my favorite, Mistress Carrie.
Hey, this is Corey from Stone Sour, and you're listening to, you have the privilege of listening to Mistress Carrie. Oh, God. Oh, yeah.
George, hello. Thanks for hanging out with me today.
Thanks for inviting me.
Congratulations. People are going to hear this a little bit later, but today your EP comes out, so congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's exciting.
And you should be celebrating, and you're not, because you're not with any of the guys in your band right now. Where are you right now? What are you doing?
So I'm at home in Santa Barbara. I came down with the COVID, and of course it was the week that we're supposed to play with Soul Asylum in Chicago, one of our best markets. So it was such a mixed thing, because I knew what the right thing to do was, but then I also felt guilty, like I was letting my guys down. And then they were quick to send me that Pearl Jam, their drummer has COVID, and they went out with 2 drummers to cover their show. So I feel a little less guilty. And it sounds like the show went really well last night for them. So that's exciting.
I talked to Jonathan Davis from Korn on the show. I talked to Jeff Keith from Tesla on the show. And they said, when it comes to the singer, you got to protect us because you can't do a show without us. But if it's one of the band guys, you can always find somebody to step in if somebody's sick, but you always got to protect the singer. So as the drummer, as the Spinal Tap joke goes, they're going to bring somebody in to replace you.
Well, and the thing that's funny is that hopefully the guys aren't watching this. The thing is that I know this, but they're always like, no, we can't get another drummer. I'm like, yeah, you can.
Don't tell them.
But let them think that, right?
Job security. You want to keep the gig, man. You want to keep the gig.
Right.
Well, I was excited that I was going to get to talk to you because Dishwalla is one of those bands that has been around now. When I say 25 years or more, it kind of blows my mind that it's been that long.
Yes. No, it blows my mind too. And it kind of puts my life into 25-year chunks where like it was 25 when it happened around, and then 25 years later I'm here. And then I'm like, wow. So I know what 25 years feels like.
It's a long time. It's hard to remember the first 25 because you're a kid and you have no concept of time or whatever. But when you go from 25 to 50, you remember a lot of that. Most of it.
Well, not that one night.
But then you realize, like, wow, that went by really shockingly fast.
Yeah.
And then you start worrying about the next 25 because you're like, I mean, there are people that live to be like 119, but you want the good years.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and that's what I got a grasp of. These next 25 are the good years. This is it, to go out and play and keep doing what we're doing, and for sure.
And as a drummer, I mean, if we can throw some shade on the rest of the guys in your band, you're the one that it's most dependent for you to be physically healthy.
Yes.
Because you got to be able to play the drums. I mean, B.B. King could be in his 90s sitting down in a chair shredding.
Right.
But it's hard to be a 90-year-old drummer.
It is. Well, in so many of our peers' bands, I'll go out and play a show somewhere, and here's the band that we toured with all through the 90s, and there's some 20-year-old playing drums. And it's because the drummer physically can't do it anymore. And I feel very blessed to be able to say that I can still drum. But I started when I was 5. And so drumming for me it's like one of the things that I do, as opposed to like really having to prep for it, or, I'm lucky that it's kind of almost just second nature to play drums,
Well, you bring up when you started playing drums, and I love asking drummers this question, and you're a dad, so you can get it from both sides of the equation. I feel like if you're a parent, one of the things that you just pray that your kid doesn't want to do as they get older is play the drums.
Right.
Because it's so loud and so big and expensive. So what was that journey like? Are you the first drummer in the family? Did this get gifted to you? How did this start?
Okay, so the story goes that we watched Merv Griffin as a family. In fact, anything that we watched as a family, because my dad hated TV. And when I was a kid, I hated that. But as an adult, I'm so glad that he did that, because he would only let us watch music or something that, you can watch as a whole family. And so Merv Griffin, of course, they would always have Buddy Rich on. They'd have all these, these drummers and feature them. And I guess I saw Buddy and I said, I want to drum. And I was about 3. And so they're like, oh, that's cute. And then at 4, I said, I really want to drum. And so my mom had some bongos because, what was it, the 60s.
Everybody had bongos in the 60s, yeah.
Right. So I would play on these little bongos. And then finally my dad was like, I think this kid's got it, right? And my dad was very musical. So he went to the local drum shop, Mike's Drum Shop, and said to the guy, who was a very honorable guy who owned the business, my dad's in there with his wallet open wanting to buy a drum set, right? And the owner of the shop goes, you don't buy 5-year-olds drum sets, right? And my dad said, well, if he wants to play drums, why would I get him a practice pad? Of course I'm going to buy him a drum set, right? So he buys me a Rogers drum set with Zildjian cymbals, something that a pro would want at that age, right? Or in that era. So the funny thing is, to fast forward a little bit, my dad played bass and has this bought this beautiful 73 Fender jazz bass, right? Well, he had always told me that as I was drumming, he decided he'd get his bass so that we could play music with each other. And I found the receipt for the bass the other day.
Just the other day?
Well, the other day for me is a couple of years ago.
Oh, okay. But recently.
Well, when we moved houses, and I found the receipt from Jensen's Music, which is still here. And it was actually about a year before he bought my drum set. So really what happened is he got a bass. He was like, I really need a drummer. And so I was fortunate to have a bass player dad. And that meant right from the beginning of playing with another person, which is probably the most important thing you can do as a drummer, is get used to playing with other people. And he would point out where I was supposed to hit my kick drum. And, he was always on me about, okay, tell me where the one is. And, so I had not just support, but serious support, encouragement every day. Are you practicing? But it was funny because it was never, go practice for 3 hours. It was, you feel like drumming today? And I thought that was, in hindsight, as a drum teacher now and as a dad and all that, it's like, what a great technique. Instead of saying, go practice your drums and your rudiments.
Because then it's punishment.
Right, yeah. So no, I had support right from the get-go.
You skipped over the pots and pan phase, which is where every drummer starts.
Yeah, and I want you to keep in mind, we were not spoiled. My dad was a Greyhound bus driver. I was not I didn't grow up silver spoons. I'm like, hey, give me the best drum set out there. It was a stretch. It was a stretch, and it was definitely very unusual at the time.
He was probably just so excited that someone else in the family was going to want to play with him.
Yes, I'm sure. I know that's what it was. And then my mom eventually, my dad was in my room with my drums with me a lot. And I think that was part of why we moved the couch out of the living room and the drum set and the bass rig into the living room. And so we took our dining room and that was where we hung out. And then the living room was where we played music.
And so did you pass this on to your kids? Are they musical as well? Because it definitely seems like it's a little bit environmental, and there's got to be a genetic component to it as well.
Yeah, there is. And it's the interesting thing with my kids is I've barely taught them any drums, and they both can play drums. And my son just sat down at the drum set and started playing one day. And so, like any dad would, anyone that came into my shop when my son was there, I'd say, hey, check out my kid drumming. And he's tiny, barely even reach the pedals, right? And so one day I'm showing him off, and my daughter's there, and she goes, Daddy, I can do that too, right? And I said, no, honey, I didn't know that.
Good girl.
And she just lays down this perfect groove. And then way early on, I taught them both just 2-note chords, just to kind of hear what music sounded like to move through things and resolve or whatever. And so now my daughter writes songs and sings and plays guitar and ukulele and bass and keyboards and drums. And my son plays almost all of those. He doesn't like to sing, which I understand because I don't either. But they're very musical. Very musical. Yeah.
I'm so envious of that because I'm such a music lover myself. But my illustrious clarinet career in the marching band in high school was just cut short because when you love rock music, there's not a lot of hard rock / heavy metal clarinetting going on.
No, and the saxophone got so done in the 80s, it's not going to come back for a while.
Yeah, it's still going to be a while.
Yeah.
I'm such a lover of music, though, and that was something that I got gifted by my parents really early on. And so I have this theory about, you talk about 25-year blocks of our lives, right? So I have this theory that when you're growing up, you get gifted all this music from parents, the cool uncle, if you have older siblings. And then that's kind of what introduces you to music. But then something happens. There's a day, a line in the sand where you hear a song, an album, a band or something. And for the first time, that's like you declaring your independence and you go, no, that's mine.
Right.
So what were those for you? What was the soundtrack growing up in your house? And then what was the band or the song that you went, okay, this is mine now. I've made a decision that I like this.
I'm going to say Rush.
Wow, good.
Yeah, and the reason is that everything else had been picked for me before that. My drum teacher was really into Tower of Power and Average White Band and Pablo Cruz and all these things that, yeah, he basically was picking anything I was listening to because it was what I was playing drums to at the time, or whatever that was in the lesson. And at the time, I didn't think much about it. It was just whatever my drum teachers, told me to get on vinyl at the time. And but then now that I have it still in my collection, I'm like, are you kidding me? I've got Tower of Power and Average White Band records.
Yes.
So,
what were your parents listening to at home?
Well, my mom was listening to Elvis, and that's it. My dad was all over the place. You'd be listening to Man of La Mancha in the morning, Chuck Mangione in the afternoon, the soundtrack to Saturday Night Fever at night, and then some kind of a jazz record, maybe a Shelly Manne record. So it was his was the whole like all over the place thing. And lots of Eagles, lots of Doobie Brothers, that kind of stuff, the California stuff. And but then, yeah, somehow, I got into punk, and I got into the first Motley Crue record somebody gave me in 8th grade. And that was mind blowing. Right. And I liked the punk because my parents didn't. But the first thing that I went, this is my music, that was definitely Rush.
And it's amazing that, after Neil Peart passed away a couple years ago, when you go back and try, failing miserably, to measure the influence that he had, not just on rock and roll, but drumming in general, that it would not have become what it was if it were not for him, because he was an equal and arguably overshadowing member of the band, not the Spinal Tap joke that you can just replace the guy in the back.
Right.
I mean, even the Foo Fighters said it when they inducted him into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They're like, they let the drummer write the lyrics.
Right. Well, thank God for that, because they let me do that in this band too sometimes.
Yeah, which is not a super common thing, but not all that abnormal either. The drummer never gets the credit.
No, and you have to get used to that. And I've taught a lot of students that are now pros, and they'll come to me with this, here I am in this gig, and they're still looking over their shoulder at me. I'm like, they're going to look over their shoulder at you for the rest of your life. No matter how accomplished you are, you're going to get in a room with somebody, and they're going to look over their shoulder at you. Yeah, I play in cover bands now that I love them. They're dear, sweet people, but they're critiquing everything I'm doing. And I just smile and I let them. You know what I mean?
And growing up looking at drummers, right, from not only a technical standpoint with Neil Peart, but also a performance standpoint. And then you look at a guy like Tommy Lee that just was like, I'm putting my kid on a roller coaster. Let's do this. I mean, talk about moving the drums to the forefront.
Yeah. No, and it's interesting because having been a drummer or a student from 5 until whenever, when the band got signed, I was still very much concerned about my posture and how I was hitting and where my things were placed, right? And then we went out and did my first tour, and I'm like, oh man, People just want to see me pound the crap out of everything. And then I was like, and this is fun, right? so I went from, hitting hard and being in a rock band and all that. But then all of a sudden I was like, my cymbals are way up here and I'm hitting like this, and it was great fun. And you look at the old videos, you can see me, I'm, pounding the crap out of everything. And it is part of the show. And I teach a rock camp in the summers.
Yeah, I was reading about that.
Yeah. And so one of the things I tell the drummers is if the show is seeming a little flat, even if they're not looking at you, start to go off. And it's the funniest thing, because if any band, including Dishwalla, seems like they're having a little bit of a dry moment, I'll just start to go off more. And they're not even looking at me. And the next thing you know, they're starting to go off more. And then Rodney does turn around and look at me like he invented it. You know what I mean?
It is the heartbeat of the band, and you do have that power and control over kind of steering the overall sound, even if people don't want to give you the mental credit for it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And you talk about, family time around the TV. We all grew up watching the Muppets, man. Animal is the guy.
Right.
I mean, talk about an example of the drummer going off. He's the only member of the band most people can even name.
Yeah, exactly.
So when you're growing up and you're realizing you have drumming ability, going from taking drum lessons and having drumming ability to getting in a band that gets signed and then hits the radio the way that Dishwalla is, that is a rocket ship level takeoff, that 0 to 100. What do you remember about that kind of time, and how did you navigate that without going insane? Because the band got huge fast and huge.
Yeah. Well, there's a few things. One is that people think we're an overnight success, but the 3 or 4 of us that were, there were a couple of us that were playing together since we were 13, 14 years old. And then the next stage was in our, 19s, 20s. And so really, like, if you think of it as an overnight thing, we had been plugging at it the whole time. I mean, even at 13 and 14, we were out playing and winning adult battle of the bands and all this stuff. And playing in our hometown. And then also, like, as it was happening, I think sometimes to our detriment, the people inside, like agents and labels and management, were always like, well, you're not that big. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, I kind of feel like it would have been better for our psyche if they were like, you guys are amazing. You've got the #1 song, the most played song of 1996. That would have probably given us a little more confidence. And what are you doing next year?
Right.
I don't see the numbers on the next single. So there's that humbling thing. Plus, we're from a town where 7 bands got record deals in a couple of years. Ugly Kid Joe, Toad the Wet Sprocket, Snot. So it's not like we could walk around State Street like, hey, we're the biggest band in town. It's like, well, we're one of the biggest bands. You know what I mean? So it was humbling. Santa Barbara's good about keeping people humble. I think that's why a lot of celebrities move here, is you get to just be normal here and no one really cares. Like you can walk down the street that you grew up on and be all proud of yourself, and then your next door neighbor's Michael McDonald's son.
Yeah.
And so
have a good time trying to compare, resumes over at the McDonald house.
Yeah. So no, it was. I think it was probably. I would say for me personally, it was probably a little weirder when it slowed down, because it seemed like that's what we were working for. Like, we're going like this, we're doing this, we're actually, you know what I mean? And then when all the labels sold to Seagrams, and then they all sold to Universal, and then 900 bands got dropped, that was weird.
Yeah.
Or Napster coming out right when our song came out. There were magazine articles written about how we were the first band ever with that many plays on radio to not be like a 7 million album seller. And it was because of Napster. So I think that part was harder, because I almost expected to get signed and have a hit song.
Well, you were in a pocket where it was common. And it's amazing how music gets huge regionally, right? Like, you know, you talk about the Motley Crue era of the 80s in Hollywood, and it was like there were just all of these bands getting signed. And then you look at what happened in Seattle and all these bands getting signed, and it's like, you know, the expectation that they could all sustain and that it would never change. You know,
Right.
The 80s never saw the 90s coming. They just always thought that success, you know, I talked to guys like Dee Snider, and it was like, he said, you know, 1 minute we were doing what we did, and then we got a telegram that said nobody wants what you do anymore, and it was over.
Yeah.
And you look at bands I love, and there are so many examples, but I try to remember a decision that I made at 13 or 14 that I would still be cool with making now. It shocks me the number of bands that got together at that age and wrote songs that still hold up. Like, you made a massive life decision in your teen years to get in a band with some of these guys, and all these years later, still happy with the decision. Whereas me, I'm like, did I do anything right at that age? Like, I don't think I did.
Well, I know there was one point where one of the members of the band and I, it was about 3:00 in the morning, and we had just gotten frozen burritos from 7-Eleven. We microwaved them. The middles of them were still frozen. So we're eating these half frozen burritos in this broken down van, you know, in the driveway, about to unload our stuff at 3 a.m. back into the house. And we had it was a break from school. I want to say maybe a Thanksgiving break or something. And all of our friends, because we had decided not to go to college. We had decided that if we're going to college, then we're not working on music. So let's work on music. If it doesn't work, then we'll go to college, right? Well, now everyone's in their 3rd or 4th year at college. They've got job placement. They're getting degrees. They know they're guaranteed income, right? And we're like, we lived in studios.
We're eating a frozen burrito in our driveway, emptying a van at 3 a.m. This sucks.
Exactly. And I remember we were both on the same page of how much it sucked. And he said, you know what? If this is all I do for the rest of my life, that's fine with me.
That's big.
It is.
And
I felt the same way.
It's a huge thing, I think, in life, right? And not just music, but just in life in general, that if you can find people that you're happy being miserable with, that's kind of the goal, right? I mean, isn't that the whole point of it?
It is. Yeah. And then there's a little bit of that hippy dippy, do what you love and the money will come thing. Stick at it long enough. It really was kind of throw every option out the window. I remember my mom, she's a dear, sweet woman, and she's very proud of me, but she's also practical. And she's like, it's very nice that you're doing well with your music, but you should probably have a backup plan, right? And she wanted me to go to City College and get this degree and stuff. And I was talking to this woman that my dad was friends with that was a motivational speaker. And I said, no, my mom really wants me to go to college. And she said, for what? And I said, as a backup plan, as a safety net. And she goes, well, safety nets are for people who don't fall.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
My mom was a career nurse for her entire life, like got her nursing degree in high school and was a nurse, loved it, like life's passion, and always wanted me to get into medicine. And I always loved music and wanted to be in the music business and wanted nothing to do with it. And she's been sick like you with COVID recently. And so I've been the caretaker, right? And I have the bedside manner of a sledgehammer. And I said to her just the other day, aren't you glad I didn't listen to you? Because I would have been Nurse Ratchet, that joke. Like, I don't have whatever it takes for you to be the amazing nurse you were your whole life. You didn't give that to me. And like, I'm so glad, but it's the same kind of thing. Like, this is what I love to do. This is what I want to do. I just hope I don't fuck it up.
Right. Well, and look at this. What a short spin. We already know we've got a short spin.
Right.
That everyone makes all these grand plans for how their life's going to pan out. Then we have a freaking pandemic.
Yeah.
And more than half of our lives as a world have changed now. Course and career and finance and everything. And we're having to look at ourselves like if we hadn't done that other really practical path, we're in the same position.
Unless I had gone into medicine like my mother said, and then I'd have total job security right now.
Right, yeah. Medicine, plumbing, and mechanics, right? Isn't
Seriously. Seriously. It's like, boy, did I screw that one up. Because the same thing happened in radio that you talked about that happened with the labels, that everything got so centralized and massive layoffs. And then it got even worse because of COVID. And so, where there used to be opportunities for those 900 bands that had record deals before, all of the companies centralized everything, the same thing happened with radio, that they realized with technology, they didn't need everybody that they were paying. And so they got rid of a lot of people. Yeah. Centralized programming, it just totally changed the industry.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it did. And for a short time, I had a radio show called What's New, and it was all new music, right? And it was also supposed to be kind of regionally focused because we have so many artists in Santa Barbara. And it was funny because we would have a band on, and then we would interview them, and then they bring their cajon and their acoustic guitars, and they play a couple songs. Then we play a track off the CD, right? And then they would go home. And everyone's like, this is groundbreaking. I'm like, this is what I did for all of the 90s. This isn't groundbreaking.
Yeah.
And then right when that got big, the main controller saw that all this stuff was happening. And now all of a sudden we're having just from the label sent in and who they choose to have on. And so it's interesting because you'd like to think that there was that DJ that broke that band.
Used to happen. Happened at the stations that I worked at. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what gave radio that amazing power, was that local connection with the audience, because, I'm just outside of Boston, right? I can't imagine growing up in Santa Barbara. I can't imagine having California weather every day. Bostonians are way too pissed off and angst-filled because half the year, fuck Mother Nature. So our radio stations are obviously, the music that comes out of our cities is going to be different. There's going to be an edge. You look at bands like, Jay Giles or Aerosmith, or even more modern examples like Stained and Godsmack. There's an edge there that you're not going to get from a West Coast band.
No, I agree.
And I didn't understand that until I traveled. Right? Yeah. Like I went to California and I listened to Incubus and I was like, okay, I totally get it now. I listened to reggae in Jamaica and I was like, oh, this makes perfect sense. But trying to understand reggae and a snowdrift can not give you the idea that you're trying to figure out.
Yeah, exactly.
And that is what, what makes music, that regional component of it, and what made radio have that regional component that was so powerful. And I still believe there's a place for it. I just don't know how the next kind of iteration of radio and the music business, how that's all going to work. I think the only way is for the big companies to sell off the signals and have little privately owned companies start buying up these regional radio station signals again, because they're going to focus everything digitally. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either, because they have really, like you mentioned, like you knew this sound was coming from here. You knew this sound was coming from here. They've kind of decided as programmers, everything's going to sound like it could come from here.
Like I went to Seattle and I was like, I totally understand why grunge exists and why it came from here. Because now I've been here and I understand, like, you haven't seen the sun in 3 months. No wonder you're sad. I get it.
No, I mean, Seattle, when it sounds like Alice in Chains. Not Alice in Chains sounds like they're from Seattle.
No, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Well, a funny thing about that is when we were sitting down with our label, what happened was we decided to kind of write a lot of stuff in the studio for Pet Your Friends. And we had some ideas, but we knew that we wanted to just make them kind of elaborate on them a little more and change our sound a little bit to make it edgier. And it was because our live show was edgy and our recordings weren't. And they're like, you know what, your guys' live show's edgy. Why don't you bring that into your writing and into your recordings, right? And so we're meeting with producers and we're meeting with the label, and they're like, you guys smile a lot. And we're like, yeah. Like you're it's kind of an edgy time, right? I mean, Jane's Addiction and Nirvana and all this stuff. And aren't you guys angry about anything? Like, sometimes the surf sucks. And they're like, no, that's not what we meant.
Have you been to Santa Barbara?
We're like, all of our parents are still married. We didn't have. I'm kidding. Our parents weren't married, but we didn't have that much to be pissed off about, right? I joke about how our era in that band in the '90s, because we all hung out together, was like a giant Mountain Dew commercial. If we weren't at the beach having a barbecue, we were up at the river on a rope swing, and it was a good time for us. So they sent us to Philadelphia.
That'll do it. Got to inject a little hate into Dishwalla. Send him to Philly. Yeah. They throw shit at Santa.
And it was super intentional. We're like, we got to get the dirt under these nails. Let's send these boys to Philly. So we went and lived there for about 3 months and did our record there. And I had personally a very typical experience because I was done before everyone. I got my tracks done in like 2 weeks.
Drummer always got to go first, man.
2.5 months off in Philly, right? So I'm going to get lunch, and I'm standing in this really long line at Tony and Joe's, right? And I get to the front of the line, and I said, I think I'll have. He goes, get back in line and order when you're done thinking. I was like, whoa.
It's a Seinfeld episode. It's a soup Nazi.
It's total soup Nazi.
That came from a real place. That stuff happens.
Right. Well, not in Santa Barbara.
You talk about songwriting. I love asking this question of songwriters because it's a craft I just don't get. I don't understand it. I wish I could do it. Can you give me an example? I don't care about the artist or the genre, the type of music. That's inconsequential. But give me an example of a song from a songwriter's perspective that you think is a perfect example of good songwriting to the point where like you covet it and you go, God, I wish I wrote that. But I want you to break it down for me as to why it's brilliant songwriting.
Let's see.
And it's different than just a song you love because it's the mechanics of it. It's the blocks of it from a trained, educated perspective, meaning a songwriter, that you're going to look at the parts different.
This might seem really generic because I'm not, believe me, I don't even own OK Computer, right? I'm not a huge Radiohead fan. I am a huge Radiohead fan, but I'm not like a fanboy. I'm not like a musician going, oh, it's Radiohead, because that's what you're supposed to say.
Right.
Fake Plastic Trees, I have to say, is a masterpiece. And there's something about it. There's like a symphonic element to it. There's a simplicity to it. For me, if something's simple and still makes you go, oh, that's a great song, you know.
It comes up a lot because I love asking that question because I've never, other than the Beatles, I've never had anybody give me like the same example because everybody kind of, you know, goes through and filters a song and its parts differently. But the concept of the brilliance of simplicity comes up over and over again. So it's funny that you said that.
Yeah, no, I think there's something there's more in the space sometimes than there are if you put a lot of notes in them. Imagery too, like when you hear words and you can make your own pictures, even if it's not the ones that the person meant when they're writing them, you know.
Well, that's the beauty of it, is that it's got to be specific enough to conjure an image, but not so specific that it leaves room for me to kind of fill in the gaps myself as the fan.
Right. Yeah.
On that vein, now, I hate to say it, but like 90s music has like found this new audience and it's become this retro thing.
Yeah.
And obviously Dishwalla is kind of grouped into that, where there's this whole new generation of music lovers that are now discovering 90s music, and the icons of the 90s are iconic to a generation that they weren't even alive when this stuff came out originally. How has that been for Dishwalla, like finding this whole new fan base all over again?
Well, for me, it's been interesting because I took a little hiatus because of an injury. And then when I came back and played the first show and the curtain opened and I saw these old people, I was like, oh, who are these people? And I went, oh, those are my people. and then about 5 years ago, the curtain opens and then there's 20-somethings out there. And it was like, okay, what's this? And then there's 20-something that know words to songs that weren't the hits, right? And so thank goodness sometimes for those algorithms, because they were listening to Nirvana and they were listening to Soundgarden, and like, you might also like this, and then now all of a sudden our demographic went from mainly women that were our age to 25 to 40-year-old men is 65% of our demographic now, which is just a trip to me.
And it's crazy because, as you said before, Dishwalla was one of the early kind of quote unquote victims of the digital age of music. And now that digital age, as it's evolved, is finding you a whole new fan base. It's crazy that it's come full circle that way.
It is. Yeah, it is.
Was that part of the driving force to wanting to put out a new EP and kind of just put out new music just because you've got this whole new audience now?
We knew we wanted to do a new record in 2017 when we did, because it started to be, are we going to just be the Counting Blue Cars cover band?
Right.
For the rest of our lives,
Yeah.
And blessed to have that. I'm not one of those guys that's like, I don't want to play Counting Blue Cars ever again. I want to play it every time we play.
No, you can hope as a band you get that one song that lasts. Like, you just need one.
And the rush of hearing thousands of people say, like children often do in chorus, is like, that'll never get old. So we did Juniper Road, and that did well for us. And then the 25th anniversary happened during COVID, and that was going to be it's our 25th, and that's why you're coming to see us now.
Right.
And so as a band, we kind of did an inventory and said, well, what are people going to want? They're going to want new material. And then the label said to us, new material, you don't have to do a whole album. Let's just do this EP and get some stuff out. So
it's kind of gone back to the 50s where you can just release a single or an EP. That's how bands used to do it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so this label, I don't know, man, they were onto something, because with Juniper Road, they asked for the CD rights, and we all kind of looked at each other like, CD rights for what? What are you going to do with them? And then not only have they sold out of them, we've recouped, and we're now on to making a profit off of the CDs from Juniper Road. So they came to us with this and said, let's do a limited release CD, sell it with a T-shirt and just, this limited number of things to make it really special. And I think that new formula is kind of working for fans and for bands. Because as a fan, they don't have to buy a whole CD anymore.
Yeah.
Buy one download.
Yeah.
One song off 20 albums. You buy one download.
Hey.
Shut us off.
There was a glitch in the Matrix. They didn't want us talking about your new release, right? We get to the part that the record company wants us talking about, and the computer's like, no, you're not going to talk about it.
What is this with technology ruining my career again?
I know, right? Although I got to be grateful for it because, especially through COVID, it allowed me to keep working. It's amazing, how small this gear is to be able to, I built my own studio.
Right. Yeah. No, I was able to keep teaching drum lessons during COVID, which was, all through Zoom.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you got the new EP out, and you're celebrating your 25th anniversary a little late.
A little late, yeah.
But you're going out on the road once you're done with all of your COVID stuff. You're actually going to play down in Vegas on Fremont Street at the Fremont Experience, which is always an interesting experience. Such
a great show. The last time we played there, it was just shocking, because I typically, as the drummer from Goo Goo Dolls calls it Anonymityville horror. I can play a show and I could just walk back to my room. And so I got off stage, hung out a little bit in the backstage area. And I don't know if you've seen the Fremont thing, but when bands are playing, you can't move.
Yeah.
Like at all. And so I looked at this crowd and I'm like, usually I can get through here, not a very big guy. And man, no, hey. And then just this huge amount of people. It was mind blowing, to be honest with you.
A free concert where they sell $5 liquor drinks on the street in Vegas. I mean, it's a recipe for disaster.
It is. Yeah. It is.
But bands love playing it because it is that kind of, like, it's unpredictable. It's about as rock and roll live on the edge of your seat as can be, because you're thrust into the middle of Vegas.
Right, exactly. No, it's kind of a dream gig, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's nice to be able to like, I mean, it's weird to talk about because you're dealing with COVID right now, but for bands to actually finally be able to go out on the road.
Yes.
Having weathered this, isolation, the shutdown of the industry, trying to figure out income and revenue streams and keeping your families fed. And I mean, there are, we were talking about like healthcare. They're not going to be out of a job, but I think entertainment, more so than any other industry, got hit the hardest and is going to take the longest to recover.
Yeah. And to be honest, I've only done one show since COVID. It was in Carrollton, Texas. There were probably 10 or 12,000 people. It was an awesome show, but even that was weird because no one was masked anywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, it was during California's mask mandates and other states too. And it's still interesting to me to see how it's going to go with being out amongst all the people. But yeah, as a band, we've decided that it might be normal to have to find a replacement for anybody except for the singer, obviously.
Right.
Because this is just our new norm, that somebody might have COVID and you can't go canceling all your shows every time someone's got COVID. I know that sounds crazy to say out loud, but that's kind of where we are. It's either change careers don't work anymore or figure out how to work in this new environment, And
it's something that I think, the singers have always had to worry about: bronchitis, the flu, a sinus infection, an ear infection, whereas maybe some of the other band members, if you got the sniffles, you can still get behind the kit. It'll be miserable. There'll be snot everywhere, but you can still play.
Right. Well, and there was a part of me that was going to go, I was still going to go and do the show. And then we started realizing that, we're thinking about us and doing this show, and we're not thinking about the other people.
Yeah.
And the cast and crew of the other, traveling group. Do they want me there with my COVID backstage, with my mask off on stage playing? No, and so you have this kind of responsibility to everybody else aside from your own health, And
it's something that comes up a lot on the show, that it gives you perspective on the relationship with the fans, right? That feeling that when you did get to play that show in Texas and you finally got to do what you love again, it really makes you understand how much you love it because it got taken away for so long.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And getting it back, however, we got to get it back. We just got to get it back.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. We got to get it back for us and for our needs. It's so good as just people need this. They need to get together. Number one, music is one of the most healing things on earth. So we do all need to get back to it. The players and the listeners and the fans and stuff. Yeah.
And rock music seems to be this amazing example of like tolerance and inclusion all of a sudden. I call us the land of misfit toys, where the rock fans didn't belong anywhere else. So we made our own party that no one else wanted to go to. And now we're kind of showing everybody that, like, no, we want the weirdos that don't fit. Like, maybe the world could use a little bit more of that example from us for a change.
Yeah, I think so. For sure. Well, I've always thought that rock was where the misfits thrive, for sure.
We don't need you at our party. We're fine without you.
Right.
We can be weird over here together. It's totally fine.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Hopefully you are on the mend and feeling better and able to get back out on the road soon and finally be able to play, new music live in front of crowds again and, quote unquote, get back to normal.
Yes. Thank you.
And congratulations on the release of the new EP.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. We'll see you soon. Thanks, George. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
There he is, George Pendergast from Dishwalla. Their new EP, Alive, is available everywhere. And you can hear songs from the EP on the corresponding playlist for this episode. It's linked in the show notes. I make a playlist for every full-length episode of the Mistress Carrie podcast, And it's filled with my guest music and all of the music that we reference in the interview. You'll also find all of George Pendergast's links and the links to find Dishwalla online. And you'll find my links there too. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe and follow the Mistress Carrie podcast. It's available everywhere. New full-length episodes come out every Wednesday, plus every weekday you get the sit rep. The Situation Report is all of your rock news, music headlines, and industry info in less than 5 minutes. Plus, you never know when we're going to release a bonus episode. And just in time for the holiday weekend, check out the new Mistress Carrie tank tops. They're available in the online store at mistresscarrie.com. While you're on the website, you can also check out my blog, my concert calendar, my photo galleries, and so much more. And join me live every Tuesday night at 8:30 Eastern on my official Facebook page for Cocktails in the War Room. The Mistress Carrie Podcast, a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network.
And now another no-brainer money-saving tip from Progressive.
It looks like your luggage is over 50 pounds. Is there anything you can take out?
Oh, yeah. Let me just toss all these $20 bills.
Great. Let me grab you a trash can.
Stop. Instead of throwing money away, move some clothes into a carry-on. And here's a better tip from Progressive on how not to waste money. Don't pay too much for car insurance. Drivers who switch and save could save hundreds. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary.
At the Home Depot, we're dedicated to helping you build the skills that get your home projects done right. That's why we offer free and interactive online DIY workshops. During the live streams, our knowledgeable associates help you tackle your DIY projects no matter your age or skill level. You can learn how to install new single-pole switches, as well as standard duplex and GFCI outlets. Register for free at homedepot.com/workshops. The Home Depot, how doers get more done.